Have you ever heard that old adage, hire somebody better than you? Maybe you haven't, but it is something that goes on in business, and it's kind of one of those statements that is probably true, but most people ignore. Everybody says it's good advice, and everybody says they follow it, but not a lot of people are doing that. I think when it comes to comics, there is something true about that. And by the way, spoiler: this isn't a negative. This is a negative video. It's generally positive. Most of the stuff in here is positive. Looking at the cases where comics and publishers and others have leveled up and what to look for. I promise this isn't just me bitching about comics for 10 minutes. I promise. I pretty much promise. Hey everybody, this is Perch. No, if you're following me through the jump, mostly this is me bitching about business. There's this statement that is often made in companies that you should hire people who are smarter than you. If you're a manager, you're hiring for a role, you should hire somebody more capable than you. The general thought is that this person who is more capable than you will come in and do the job they're hired for, the basics. They'll do it well, and they'll give a little bit more. They'll give stuff that you're not giving, stuff that you're not thinking about, which will then allow you to raise up. It's the philosophy that we get better when we're pushed from below as well as above. Most companies, people understand the push from above. That's a manager coming in and saying, hey, here's your goals, you can do better, here's stuff to work on. That's all good stuff. But to truly achieve, you need to be pushed from below and above. You need to have people below you who are kind of encouraging you and pushing you to do the best you can, so you don't get complacent, so you don't just kind of stay at this static place. Well, when it comes to comic books, this model is broken to some extent in the sense that most jobs at comics are freelance jobs. If you're talking about the larger publishers hiring somebody, they're hiring independent contractors. They're hiring people who are coming in who are temporary by nature. And I think the comic industry has fooled itself a little bit by saying that, hey, the creators like this. This is an interesting topic because there's this comment that goes around a lot of creators going, yeah, I would never want to work for a company. I like being on the outside. I like having my freedom. I like being able to move if I want. I always I remember kind of being bought into this in the 20s. Like, yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, that's why you'd want to get into comics. You don't have to report to the man. You get to kind of move and have more flexibility and more freedom. But here's the thing: I don't think any of that stuff is true. I don't think you actually do get more flexibility. I don't think you actually do get more freedom. I think in general, you are, bound to kind of a paranoia that your contract is going to go away. You're kept on a very short leash. I don't think that you're actually as independent as you think you are. I mean, and now everybody has to look at their situation the best way possible. I think now that we're all living in the time of COVID, we're like, yeah, man, I've always wanted to stay home, and I've always wanted to, focus on me, to spend some inner time focusing on me. But generally speaking, this is us kind of, justifying something to ourselves. I think, mostly, like I would like to be out, in a bar with like 50 other people screaming at the TV. That's what I'd really like to be doing. You ever watch? I've heard that there's this new thing in YouTube, and there's these playlists of like crowds in places, like that scene where in Game of Thrones where Arya Stark murdered off the evil kind of snow demon king guy. What it was his name? I don't care. But anyway, and there's all these clips of like crowds at bars watching the show and cheering and like throwing beer around and everything else. And people are like making playlists out of stuff to be nostalgic. Like, remember when we could see other people? Anyway, that seems a bit like what comics is like at times, where people are very kind of enamored, or very they're romanticizing this fact that may not actually be relevant. Imagine a different world where the publishers are like, okay, well, we're going to put you on salary, so you're going to have insurance, and you're going to have some stock options, and you're going to have incentive bonuses and everything else, and we're going to pay you a salary. So you're going to have to do 12 issues. Wow, 12 issues in a year. You're going to have to do 12 issues, and we're going to pay you 120,000 for that, and You get your bonuses and you get your profit sharing on the stuff that works, and that's where it's at. I have to believe most creators. I would be curious how many creators be like, no, no, thank you. I prefer to stay on the outside on this tight little leash. At any rate, getting past the creators into the office jobs, into the editors, that's where you see this really break down. There is a certain level of paranoia inside of comics that if somebody strong and hungry comes around, it's almost like it's very similar in one of the many ways that comic books feel similar to wrestling, where it's like, well, there's a locker room etiquette and you have to earn your spot, and there's an unofficial kind of pecking order within the backstage, and that you have to kind of live up to that, and if you don't, well, you're not going to earn your spot, you're not going to pay your dues, all these kinds of things that slow people down. But in general, it didn't always entirely, well, it didn't, I was going to say, it didn't entirely used to be this way. But there was always an element to it. It's just that it wasn't so intense as it is today. So back in the 80s, which is my favorite decade to go back and look at, you had people like Anna Cinti and Louise Simonson, and you had Bobby Chase. You had other people kind of coming up and into their own. And there was, there's certainly a pecking order, make no mistake about it. But there was this sense of, we should hire skills. We should hire people into the company. We should put people in positions of management that are going to give us a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of mentality. That sounds like corporate buzzspeak, but I promise it's not. It's the idea of, hey, you have some skills and you have some skills, and if we put those two people together, then those skills tend to multiply, and not only do both people cover what they're doing, but they each get to teach each other their tricks, and so the end result is even more powerful, where you had kind of one person expert in one thing and one person expert in another thing, that we wind up with a result of two people who were experts in a lot of things. And I think you see that in comics in the kind of the 90s and the aughts, where you had people who were part of the Marvel or DC editorial bullpen who would go on to be able to tackle much more than they did at the beginning. And I think that was a positive thing. I think this was something that comics had to some extent, even if it was informal, even if there was plenty of opportunities and room and where it should have gone further. There was a lot of good progress made in this result, where you had people who are a little bit more fearless. I mean, the problem with all this is that it takes a manager, it takes a leader who is truly fearless, who doesn't sit and is panicked about the idea that his or her job may go away if somebody smarter than them kind of comes up the line. Today, unfortunately, there's a lot more barriers put up where clever people, smart people are, it's kind of this odd combo of, they're seen as kind of unicorns, which means, we have to kind of, let them do whatever they want to some extent, but also feared. I don't know how many, it's now 2020. And 1 week ago, well, no, a little bit more, 2 weeks ago, I was talking to somebody who said, well, the publishers, it's always on their mind, the image revolution, where a lot of those Marvel guys bolted. And I'm thinking to myself, when was this? This is like 1992, right? Or 93? Like, that's always on somebody's mind? Hang on, let me do the math here. It'll say 93, 2003, 2013, 2000. Are we talking 28 years later? People are worried about another image? I mean, yikes. I mean, I think about that for a moment, and think about how much, if that fear really does live inside of the publisher, especially the big two. Think about how terrifying that is. As if you were picture yourself as a president or a shareholder or some person who's managing his portfolio, and imagine if you were sitting in a room and your leadership at your company, DC or Marvel, came to you and said, well, yeah, we're keeping a lot of our creators on a short leash, and we're really cautious about the people who gain too much power, because we don't want another 1992 happening. And if it was me, I'm like, another 1992? You mean you don't want Bill Clinton to win because Ross Perot helped split the ticket? Is that what you're? No, you wait a minute. You're talking about comic creators who went and took another job I, because they made more money that way. What? Wait, why is this in our head again? You weren't even in that company during that time. Why are we? God, why is that fear transferred to completely new people? Is there anyone at Marvel today who was at Marvel in 1992? I'm not. I'm asking legitimately. I mean, forget about the creators. The like Art Adams comes in to do a cover. He was certainly there in '92. But at the management level, at the senior editor level, is anybody at the company today that was there in '92? I don't think so. And if not, good gravy. Why are we worrying about image? What a weird what a weird thing to worry about, right? I mean, wow. Like that shouldn't be in your head. But it goes back to that basic premise of, we should you to be successful as a business, you do need to hire people in who are stronger than you. You should always be looking to up your company's game. You could argue that the person who's confident enough, self-confident enough, and brave enough to hire in people who are at a stronger level than themselves are already at a senior management level. They don't need to worry about their job because they already possess one skill that very few people have, and that's a sense of self-confidence that is genuine and a desire to put the business first. And that's a key to success. And this is good advice wherever you work. If you're working at the insurance agency or the legal office or the lumber store, wherever you happen to be, hire in smart people. Don't be afraid that the person you should see it as a gift. If you interview somebody for a job for you and you're like, wow, this person could take my job someday, that should be a happy moment. That the idea, I think the myth that some magical person is going to come in and take a job away from another smart, gifted person. It's pretty rare. Now, it happens all the time that dummies wind up making a good hiring choice, and the good hiring choice comes in and unseats the dummy. That happens all the time. So the solution to all this is don't be the dummy. At any rate, comics are a weird. I mean, a lot of comics operate out of fear as opposed to success, as opposed to a desire to go and seize territory and grow. It operates defensively rather than offensively. And it's interesting because I think if you look at this historical view of different eras in 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the aughts and other things, generally speaking, not every time. I mean, certainly the DC implosion of the late 70s is an exception to this, but generally speaking, if you go in and you play offense, it tends to work out better for the company, your profit, your line, your people, and you as a career tends to work out better than people who play defense. People who play defense tend to have short tenures, tend to do poorly, tend to lose market value. Just, as a general rule. I think there's history and stats to prove that. But I don't know. So this is just my suggestion. Hire smart, hire better than you, and you will be rewarded. And I think if you look at comics, you see kind of interesting checkered history of times where the industry did exactly that, and it worked out great for them, and times when the industry fell back into a defensive position. I'm still blown away by the fact that there are people at Marvel, in particular, sitting around worried about a repeat of '92 and the image revolution. Just amazing. It goes back to, I think I said on another show, so I don't want to be a broken record here, but I heard this comment from directly from, I'd say, a fairly senior person at Marvel, where I said, hey, if you could go back in time and basically Todd McFarlane, right? Todd McFarlane is this guy. He's kind of not I won't say the ringleader, but he's definitely kind of in many cases the guy with the fire and the spirit and the energy to go make a run at it. If you could go back to Todd McFarlane and say, "Hey, Todd, you're making say $175 a page right now, and we want to give you $400 a page, more than double. We want to more than double your page rate. Would you do it?" And because if you'd done that and you locked him up, he wouldn't have gone to found Image, and there's a good chance that Image wouldn't have been founded at all. Todd was kind of the linchpin. And the guy I'm talking to goes, "Nah, he was cooling down anyway. He wouldn't have been worth it." And I go, "You mean he would have left anyway? You mean he probably was committed even if you offered him the $400 page, he would have left anyway?" Because like, no. He was cooling down. His career was going to start to go down, so it wouldn't have been worth giving him that money. I remember sitting there like drinking my beer and thinking, I am sitting next to a stupid person. like like that. Can you imagine? I mean, what a weird way to think about things. What a weird. I mean, it's is it denial? Is it ignorance? I'm not sure what to make of all that. But anyway, what do you think? Hire people smarter than you. Play defensively. Play offensively. How do you think about all this? Or maybe you're saying, hey, shut the F up and talk about comics. You're talking too much about the business and the money. Yeah, fair point. Anyway, like, dislike, subscribe, follow me on social media, send me an email. But regardless of all those things, thanks for listening.